Hello everyone and welcome to Nick Barlow Radiology, and in this latest episode we're going to be taking a little look at greenstick fractures. So greenstick fractures occur in paediatrics, not to be confused with buccal or otherwise known as torus fractures, which we'll discuss in a later episode. But greenstick fractures tend to occur after a fall to an outstretched hand or a fouche. That's how it's known in the industry, but they can also occur in other scenarios like RTAs. A lot of sports injuries as well. As we're coming up towards summer, a lot of kids come into A&E presenting with these type of injuries after falling, and occasionally you can get it with things like vitamin D deficiency as well. So if we take a look at this X-ray example of the right wrist, this is a patient that presented after a fouche, and you can see here we have this subtle looking step in the cortex, and also crucially we've got this lucency traversing the distal radius here. This is the diaphyseal region. Here would be the metaphyseal region. Now it doesn't include fractures that extend into the physis. These are something known as Salter-Harris type fractures, which again is something that I'll talk about on another video. Okay, so but these are only concerned with the diaphyseal region and metaphyseal region. These types of fractures, basically, what happens is when the patient falls onto them, in pediatrics, the metaphyseal region is weaker than in adults. Okay, so when the patient falls, the force exerted on the metaphysis or diaphysis, it causes a break in the cortex. But because pediatric bones are a little bit more malleable, if you think that the reason that these are called greenstick is that if you see like a new twig, like a green twig, and you bend that twig, then one side of it will break, but because it's so malleable, the other side doesn't tend to. It tends to bend. One side breaks and the other doesn't. And that's exactly the principle here with this type of fracture. Okay, one side of the cortex and periosteum fractures, and it fractures through a segment coming up to about midway, but actually this other side of the cortex is preserved. In buccal fractures, incidentally, you wouldn't get a break in the cortex. The cortex will buckle on itself, but you wouldn't get a fracture through the cortex. So that's how you distinguish between a greenstick fracture and a buccal fracture, sometimes known as a torus fracture. And if we see on this lateral X-ray here, we can see we do have some associated buckling of the cortex on the dorsal aspect. Okay, but the reason that we're terming this the greenstick fracture is that it's fractured here at this point of the cortex, and you can see faintly the fracture line running across roughly to about this region here. Okay. These type of patients, you know, a lot of the treatment is conservative with these. It may require some closed manipulation if they're quite severely displaced, with a cast applied for 6 weeks. Occasionally, if they're minimally displaced, a splint may be applied. This is often the case with the buccal fractures. Okay, so that's why it's important to distinguish between these two types of fractures, because it may alter the treatment. They may need some orthopedic follow-up, these patients as well. Some of the complications with these patients are that because the bone is weak, they have a tendency to refracture. So we've got to follow these up and make sure that that fracture isn't becoming more displaced, or they're not having refractures. Okay, so that's just a little bit about greenstick fractures. So if we look for your CPD, what do you need to know? So I've put a little summary in here. The important thing to note from this is that they're incomplete fractures of the long bones. Okay, so not in the physeal region, but in the metaphyseal and diaphyseal region of the bone. They're not like buccal or torus fractures in the sense that you get a fracture through one side of the cortex. Treatment, often closed reduction and immobilization if markedly displaced. If not, then you may not need to manipulate. It may be a case of a splint application. In some cases, often a cast is applied for around 6 weeks, and then we have follow-up, because as I've said, these patients can have a tendency to refracture, so we've just got to look out for displacement. I've added in a really useful article as well by Atenoloff and Bentley and it just describes all the key features of Greenstick fractures. It's an American article, and it talks all about the epidemiology, the histophysiology of the fractures, and a little bit about treatment and follow-up as well. Okay, guys, so hopefully that's something for your CPD. And what I'll do is I'm trying to get more and more of these videos out. I'll try and do at least 1 or 2 a week. If you're happy with content, give us a like. Please subscribe to the channel. It's free to do so. I'm going to keep doing this for MSK, X-rays, abdomen and chest as well. Maybe do a little bit on pediatric chest and abdomen at some point. I think the next video I'm going to do will be a overview of the chest. So just looking at how to report a chest X-ray, the key review areas, things like that. But yeah, if you've liked it, subscribe, drop us a like, and yeah, as always, give us some feedback on content, image quality, etc. And I'll keep modifying as we go along. But yeah, thanks everyone. Bye for now.